All right, it is that time for us to start the conversations of the day right here on Channel Africa. Well, today we're going to be speaking about learning. It doesn't have an expiration date, and many people, the idea of going back to study later in life is both exciting but also can be very intimidating, whether it's pursuing a long held passion, upskilling for a career change, or you know what, maybe you just want to simply improve yourself, and it's never too late to grow. Returning to education can be a life-changing journey. We look at adult learning with the Precious Ajoonu, who's a learning and development expert, founder of SkillzHQ, joining us from Nigeria. Precious, welcome right here on Channel Africa.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be back here.
Great, it's always good to have you. Daunting when you have all these different tasks, whether you're a mother, whether you're a dad who's providing, or a mother who's trying to do all sorts of things in the household. Education can be like, you know what, do I even have time for it?
Tell me about it. Absolutely true. I'm currently doing my PhD, so definitely the right candidate for this.
Oh, nice.
So
Congratulations for
I'm,
that.
I'm back to
That's a
school.
big achievement.
Thank you, thank you. Back to school, back to doing my assignments, back to my children, asking me, Mom, have you done your assignments? So yeah, I can relate.
I'm glad that you actually highlighting how it works out, because everyone has to be in on it. Your children have to
Yes.
understand that, hey, mommy is got this big commitment in the year 2026. And I guess that's where you start involving the family in that conversation.
Absolutely. You want to, of course, start from yourself. So it's almost a very difficult thing going back to school after so many years. I did my master's, for example, about some 17 years ago, and now I'm back in school. It can be somewhat intimidating. So I think the first thing is to have the conversation with yourself, all the voices in the head, and
Mhm.
tell yourself things around, notice the fear, because for some of us, especially women, there might be some fear around failure, because we live in societies where we are almost programmed not to fail or to view failure as something shameful. So you have to have that conversation. You have to applaud yourself for even taking that step to want to either better your career, better your life, better, or even just learn. The science around
Mm.
neuroplasticity shows that we can learn at any age. So, for example, sometimes I kid that when I'm done with my postdoctoral, I probably will go back to school to study medicine. Why not? If I'm bored, I could go back to school. I could be in school in my 80s. You can be in school at any single age. I think it's the nature of the human condition for us to seek evolution. And what better way for your mind to evolve than to be in a formalized classroom of any sort?
Precious, the reason why the thought of learning again or going back to your studies scares a lot of people is because there are a lot of considerations to make when you're an adult. You have to provide, go to your job, there's your family, there's your, maybe other commitments that you've made as well. So let's look at some of these considerations. When you're deciding to go to school, how do you navigate the thought processes of everything that you need to consider before actually starting your studies?
That's a very good question. I think I'm very stoic in my approach to life. So this is me giving a disclaimer. So like I tell my children, one of the things that I believe strongly, I mean, I align with Socrates, life is tough. Might be easy for people. I know we're in the soft life generation. So if you go on social media, everybody's talking about it being soft. I don't know if Africans have it soft, but I mean,
Mm.
I'm happy to be educated on that.
Yeah,
I
please,
would
someone
think
has,
not.
yeah, let us know how that works.
Let's know how that works, right? So it's tough. And for me, I had to say this has been 6 years of deciding to do my PhD. It took me 6 years to get to the point where I said, okay, you know what? It's not getting easier, because I kept thinking, okay, my children are too small. Now they're teenagers, maybe it'll be easier. But if you're raising teenagers, you know that that's another kettle of fish. And then plus I'm
Yeah.
CEO, yeah, it's another thing, right? And then I'm CEO, I'm building a company, a Pan-African business. There's also that I've got people counting on me, and now I want to go and do research. So it's tough. But I think the understanding, because I don't want to say, oh, it's so easy. And then when someone is going through the complexity, and they're like, oh, she lied, she wasn't speaking the truth. I'm a truth teller. It's tough. But after accepting that it's tough, then you create systems. So you go into systems thinking. So what I've done is I've codified time for research. So my team, my executive assistant, and then I delegate a lot. If you are able to delegate, please do. I know, especially women, we want to do everything. I wish we could, but I don't think anybody really can. We leave that for divinity, etc. So I delegate. I've got people helping me with house chores. I've got people helping me with some things so that I can free up my time to be able to research. And then I put everything codified in a calendar. So you now have to be very disciplined with time. I like to party. I don't know about you, so I used to be like hit the clubs, in Lagos every other weekend. I can't do that anymore. Unfortunately, I told all the clubs, I'm sorry. You won't see me in the next 3 years, or, just sparingly, because, there's some sacrifice to make. I've got to take this thing seriously. So for you, it might not be the club. It might be, you go to, you've got social functions that you might not show up for, just because you have this goal that you need to achieve. So it's tough. And then get all the support that you can. So I've got a nice community of people rooting me on. So I've got my kids who are like, oh, Mom, we can't wait for you to become a professor. And, I've got my close friends who are, in my corner. I've got my father who wants to be the father of a doctor, that sort of thing. So everyone is motivating me to keep going. But yes, it's very tough. And I think just appreciating that is the first step.
Yeah, I like that you codifying everything and you putting it in a system. In terms of your leadership, how do you make sure that people also are adjusting to that aspiration? Because it's one thing to, set time for yourself, but then everyone else is still giving you those calls, still sending you WhatsApp messages because there's crisis management that we need back in the office.
Yeah. So that's another place where self-leadership, and interestingly, I'm researching leadership. So that's it, that maybe makes it easy there. But you now need to set very strong boundaries. It's of supreme importance, right? You have to have strong boundaries. So if you say you're showing up at 8 o'clock, show up at 8 o'clock. If you're not available at 9, I know in the beginning, especially my mom, and if you've got an African mother, when they call, it's always an emergency, and the emergency might just be around her chickens, something, one of them she can't find, and she wants me to do something about it.
And then it turns into a 1-hour conversation.
A 1-hour conversation about cousins and all of that. So I'm like, Mom, no, we're not doing this. She went for a function and she really needed to tell me about it. But I had exams, I had the paper to turn in, and, I would send her love, I would send her text messages, but I really cannot talk to you until Saturday. So it's sacrifices on all sides. But when I do make out time for the people that I love, because that's important too, I try to be present. So, on Sunday, I didn't do any work. I took my children to the cinema. It's a lot of juggling that you have to do, but you would need that support, and you would need to be firm, especially if you're a people pleaser, like I used to be. So it's very difficult for you to say no. You would have to learn to say no, because you are committing to yourself. You're showing up for yourself. I've got this thing on the wall in my room where I say, Precious the lion who can do anything.
Nice.
The world is my jungle.
Oh, come on.
So you have to.
I love that.
That's what it is. It's my jungle. I'm raw. I do the things that I do. So you have to continue to tell yourself, especially when it gets hard, and then socialize your community into that. Would it be easy? No. You might even lose some friends, but if they're real friends, it will be temporary.
All right, Precious, we need to take a break, We'll come back to that. Aligning yourself with people that are aligned to your learning capacity or your learning goals for the new season. We're speaking to our guest who's fantastic. Precious Ajoonu, who is a learning and development expert, founder of SkillzHQ, all the way from Nigeria. We're streaming into South Africa, and you're listening to us anywhere on the continent and the world.
Conversations are happening, and Channel Africa is at the heart of them. We tell the African story with clarity, pride, and purpose, reaching audiences that matter to your brand. Partner with us and connect your business with listeners across borders in multiple languages and markets. For partnership opportunities, sponsorship, or sales, email us at partnership at channelafrica.co.za. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
9 to 12 midday, Central African Time. On the Move with Palisa Tau and Benjamin Mushatama.
You know, they say you can't teach an old dog new tricks, but we're busting that myth today, speaking about wanting to learn at any age, especially if you are an adult navigating the world, your work, businesses, children, family, and then you decide, I also want to study. So one who's doing exactly that as well is Precious Ajoonu, learning and development expert and the founder of SkillzHQ, who's helping us explore the world of adult learning. One other thing, you know, you've made that decision. Maybe you have your own community on board with you, your family, your friends, and, you know, they're cheering you on the sidelines. But then you start opening the books, Precious. And for many people, we probably haven't opened one of those academic books for many, many years. You say it was 17 years for you, and you can be quite taken aback by, first of all, the amount of work, but maybe just how much slower your brain is than it used to be 17 or 20 years ago. Let's speak about that.
You know, absolutely, that's true. And it can be really intimidating. I remember the first time I was back in the classroom, I'm like, what am I doing here? I can quit. You know, the first time I went to school, my parents were paying. Now I'm the one paying. So I can decide, you know what, I'm going to quit and just go home, right? This is really tough. But I think the mindset, just knowing and, you know, listening to something like this where you know it's tough, and then think about the outcome. So I visualize the outcome. I visualize my graduation. I visualize being done with my research, being this leading leadership scholar across Africa and all of that. I visualize myself in conferences, taught leadership conferences across the globe. And then it comes with a good feeling. So I'm like, okay, this is difficult. You know, going through this is difficult, but we can do hard things, right? So I go back to studying. But yeah, the first few, you know, moments of it, even months sometimes might be a little much.
Yeah,
for
I'm
many of
sure.
us.
I'm sure. And you need to get your brain used to, you know, adjusting, reading again, understanding, perhaps analyzing, and many times memorizing as well for those tests and exams. You know, Ben spoke a little bit about alignment. Of course, we have our own communities that we mentioned, our friends, our family, and, you know, we walk with those who are aligned with us. Sometimes you might lose people along the way. But let's speak about alignment of a different kind. Once you do start your studies, aligning yourself with people who might be studying as well. Perhaps you've met some people, a study group, people your age, or even if they're not your age, you might be doing a similar thing. How important is that, you know, finding a new community that aligns with what you're doing now, that you guys can sort of hold each other's hands through it?
That's so important. I'm in a WhatsApp group where we just poke fun at adult education. And sometimes we say, oh, isn't this, you know, self-inflicted punishment? And sometimes I get, you know, something off people who are even struggling more than I am, or people that, you know, I'm struggling, they get something off when I say I'm struggling as well. So there's some sort of camaraderie that we get out of each other. So yes, you have to look for your community. You really have to look for people who think you can do it. You want that. So I've got a friend who is in his 70s. He's such a big mentor for me. And he's in school. He's doing the PhD program as well. So I love to call him up and I think to myself, he's got grandchildren and all of that. I don't have grandkids yet, etc. So it's probably even tougher for him than myself. The last time he was in school was 30 years ago. And I see him every time pushing himself. So just that example helps me. So it's so important for you to have, of course, your home community, but also a learning community of like minds, people who want the same things that you do, who will be there in the days where you just want to say, you know what, I quit.
Yeah. You know, life puts us in that pressure where we feel like we always have to be getting to a point where we're upskilling and we're going back to school and we're doing all of that. I'm wondering because we could be putting someone in a guilt trip right now and they'll be like, you know what, let me just do it because that's what life is all about. That means I guess I have to do it. Is this for everyone?
And so I think that for us, especially as Africans, you know, let's look at our ancestors and how they learned. If you travel across this beautiful continent, you see imprints of intelligence, you see imprints of civilizations that were always thinking. I think it's the nature of the human condition for us to always seek expansion. Whether it's living in caves and choosing to leave, your cave, or, migrating to someplace else, looking. The only reason why we think of learning as this thing outside of ourselves, because it's formalized, right? You have to go to some classroom, but there's also the classroom of life. So if you're not learning in a formalized classroom, you are probably learning in the classroom of life, right? So even when now that I'm back in school, I'm doing management, because I have been a learning and development expert for all these years, there are some concepts that are not new to me. I only now have a formalized framework of understanding it. And I suspect that when I speak with my grandma, some of these things she already knows intuitively. So we're always learning. And I
Sure.
think it's important to, push that out there so that there's no pressure.
Yeah. And, just to deal with that pressure, what do you think is the thing that is important to diminish that pressure with all these things happening? Because as much as we started on the point that you are multitasking as an adult when it comes to educating yourself in the later years of your life, there is going to be more pressure. What do you do to deal with that pressure, to quiet your soul down? Because it's hard to do that, as much as we are trying to be all philosophical here in our conversation, and definitely stoicism is the way to do so. But you do need that moment where you can just say, you know what, I can do this. I need to also just rest in between of all these multiple things I'm doing at this point of my life.
Yeah. I almost said clock it, like the teenagers in my house.
Yes, clock
Absolutely.
it.
Yeah, clock it. Yeah, bang on the money there. January was the most stressful month of my entire life. And how did I survive? I'd wake up every day at 6 o'clock and I would go for a walk. That just helps me center myself. And I told myself, no matter how busy life gets, I'm going to take 1 hour out of my day for myself, and I'm going to just go for a walk, listen to music, shout out to Burna Boy, everybody, and then just dance and have fun, because I love to dance, right? So I do that. I do that still. I still find time to go dance. I still find time, maybe not the club so much, but I do still find time to go dance. And then sometimes, I like to host. So for no reason, you don't need a reason to have a party. I like parties. So I just decide, what, friends come to my house, I'm cooking. They think I can cook, so they come, they show up, and we just have a good time. We listen to music. So it's important to find what works for you, what's zen. Sometimes it's being in nature that I love as well. So sometimes I drive somewhere. I live in a very beautiful city. I live in Abuja now. It's got all those beautiful rocks, etc. So sometimes I drive and I just come down from the car and just, soak in my city and just be present. So you have to find what really works for you and then do it. We're not machines in that sense, we're emotional beings as human beings, right? And you need to find what makes you feel whole, what makes you feel internally grounded, because you'll need that for the days, like I had to turn in a paper, I had to do XYZ.
Yeah.
I like my 8 hours sleep. I couldn't get 8 hours sleep. You're going to need something to ground you. So find your practice and,
So true. Well, we'll leave it there, Precious. Thank you so much as well for taking your time, because you have so many things to do, to also chat to us on this. And of course, all the best in your own academic journey going forward.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
That's Precious Ajoonu, learning and development expert, joining us from Nigeria, also the founder of SkillzHQ, also a PhD candidate. I mean, what can't this woman do? Helping us explore the world of adult learning. If you're thinking of doing it, just go ahead. Register now, man. You can do it. I promise. It's 9:30 Central Africa time. Let's get our latest sports news.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
We bet off with cricket news. International Cricket Council ICC pressure PCB for silence and secret negotiations. There's small chance Pakistan may make a U-turn on the decision to boycott India match at T20 World Cup 2026. Pakistan's announcement of a boycott of the match against